Good Lord. Whew. How many problems with the podcast? So many. Maybe the most problems ever. So many problems with the podcast. Files, and that file's too big, and how do you make that file smaller? And Jesus fucking Jesus. Let's try to get through. Dude, I need a cigarette though. It's probably gonna burn like incense because I'm trying to read and shit. But maybe we will take more breaks, and hopefully I learned something from all the file uploads I done today, and I can make them more streamlined, because apparently compressing files that you record on your phone is fucking vital when you're trying to upload it somewhere. Why is there so much extra bullshit? I don't know. I really don't know. Like I said, feeling our way through the darkness to create a podcast of me reading old books. Let's fucking go. Chapter 5, The Toil of Trace and Trial. Jesus Christ. That doesn't sound like fun at all. 30 days from the time it left Dawson, the saltwater Mel, with Buck and his mates at the fore, arrived at Skagway. 30 days? Jesus fucking Christ. Snail mail for sure. They were in a wretched state, worn out and wore down. Buck's 140 pounds had dwindled down to 115. The rest of his mates, though lighter dogs, had relatively lost more weight than he. Pike, the malingerer, who in his lifetime of deceit had often successfully feigned a hurt leg, was now limping in earnest. Solix was limping, and Dub was suffering from a wrenched shoulder blade. Work dogs, man. That's like real life work. Repetitive movement, you guys. Out there doing the same repetitive thing every fucking day. It will break pieces of your soul. That is true. They were all terribly footsore. No spring or rebound was left in them. Their feet fell heavily on the trail, jarring their bodies and doubling the fatigue of a day's travel. There was nothing the matter with them except that they were dead tired. It was not dead tiredness that comes through brief and excessive effort, from which recovery is a matter of hours, but it was the dead tiredness that comes through the slow and prolonged strength drainage of months of toil. There was no power of recuperation left, no reserve of strength to call upon. It had all been used, the least bit of it. Every muscle, every fiber, every cell was dead tired. And there was a reason for it. In less than 5 months they had traveled 2,500 miles. During the last 1,800 of which they had but 5 days of rest. When they arrived at Skagway, they were apparently on their last legs. They could barely keep traces, top and down grades. And on the downgrades just managed to keep out of the way of the sled. Mush on, poor feet, The driver encouraged them as they tottered down the main street of Skagway. "This the last, then we get one long rest. For sure. One bully long rest." The drivers confidently expected a long stopover themselves. They had covered 1,200 miles with 2 days of rest, and in the nature of reason and common justice, they deserved an interval of loafing. But so many were the men who had rushed into the Klondike, and so many were the sweethearts, wives, and kin that had not rushed in, that the congested mail was taking on alpine proportions. Oh no, the binding of this book just split. Fuck. I don't know if I told you guys, but this is a real old book. This is the same book I've reread so many times. And now the binding just split. That is a sad fucking day. We're all getting old. And older by the day. Alpine proportions. Also, there were official orders. Fresh batches of Hudson Bay dogs were to take the places of those worthless on the trail. The worthless ones were to be got rid of. And since dogs count for little against dollars, they were to be sold. That is exactly how production corporate America works. You go in there, you do your best job, and when you're too old for it anymore, sell you at the nearest dollar. It's probably all corporations in America, honestly. Three days passed by which time Buck and his mates found how really tired and weak they were. Then on the morning of the fourth day, 2 men from the States came along and bought them, harnessed and all, for a song. The men addressed each other as Hal and Charles. Charles was a middle-aged, lightish-colored man with weak and watery eyes and a mustache that twisted fiercely and vigorously up, giving the lie to limply drooping lip it concealed. Hal was a younger of 19 or 20, with a big Colt revolver and a hunting knife strapped about him on a belt that fairly bristled with cartridges. This belt was the most salient thing about him. It advertised a callousness sheer and unutterable. Both men were manifestly out of place. And why should such adventure? The North is part of a mystery of things that passes understanding. Buck heard the chaffering, saw the money pass between the man and the government agent, and knew that the Scotch half-breed and the mail train drivers were passing out of his life on the hills of Peralt and Franco and the others. Here we go again. Turn the page, Buck, who had gone before. When driven with his mates to the new owner's camp, Buck saw a slipshod and slovenly affair, tent half stretched, dishes unwashed, everything in disorder. Also, he saw a woman, Mercedes. Sounds sexy. Mercedes, the men called her. She was Charles' wife and Hal's sister. A nice family party. It's a nice family party. They sound shitty, like they have no discipline to clean their shit. Just saying. But Mercedes is a sexy name. I'll defend myself. Buck watched them apprehensively as they proceeded to take down the tent and load the sled. There was a great deal of effort about their manner, and no business-like method. The tent was rolled in an awkward bundle 3 times as large as it should have been. The tin dishes were packed away unwashed. Mercedes continually fluttered in the way of her men, and kept up an unbroken chattering of remonstrance and advice. Remonstrance? I've never fucking heard that. Like I said, I've read this book before, and why? It's something you probably just skip over when you read it. Remonstrance. Anyway, remonstrance and advice. When they put clothes sack on front of the sled, she suggested it should go on the back. And when they had put it on the back and covered it with a couple other bundles, she discovered overlooked articles which they could abide nowhere else but in that very sack. And they unloaded again. Oh yeah, she sounds like a fucking peach. 3 men from neighboring tent came out and looked on, grinning and winking at one another. "You've got a right smart load, as it is," said one of them. "And it's not me should tell you your business, but I wouldn't tote that tent along if I was you." "Undreamed of," cried Mercedes, throwing up her hands in dainty dismay. "However in the world could I manage without a tent?" "It's springtime, and you won't get any more cold weather," the man replied. She shook her head decidedly, and Charles and Hal put the last odds and ends on top of the mountainous load. "Think it'll ride?" one of the men asked. "Oh, think it'll ride?" one of the men asked. "Why shouldn't it?" Charles demanded rather shortly. Oh, these people have no idea what they're doing. No idea. Absolutely clueless. "Oh, that's right. Oh, that's all right. That's all right," the man hastened meekly to say. I was just wondering, that is all. It seemed a mite top heavy. Charles turned back and drew the lashings down as well as he could, which was not in the least well. And of course the dogs can hike along all day with that contraption behind them, affirmed a second of the man. "Certainly," said Hal, with freezing politeness. Take hold of the gee-pole with one hand and swing his whip from the other. "Mush!" he shouted. "Mush on there!" The dog sprang against the breastbands, strained hard for a few moments, then relaxed. They were unable to move the sled. These fucking cunts. "The lazy brutes, I'll show them," he cried, preparing to lash out at them with the whip. But Mercedes interfered, crying, "Oh, Hal! You mustn't!" As she got hold of the whip and wrenched it from him. The poor dears! Those poor dears! Poor puppies! "Now you must promise you won't be..." Wait. Oh, she's still talking. "Now you must promise you won't be harsh with them for the rest of the trip, or I won't go a step." This is the most difficult bitch in the world. Precious. Stop laughing. Precious lot you know about dogs, her brother sneered. And I wish you'd leave me alone. They're lazy, I tell you, and you got to whip them or to get anything out of them. That's their way. You ask anyone. You ask one of those men. Mercedes looked at them imploringly, untold repugnance at sight of pain written in her pretty face. Who's saying this shit? They're weak as water, if you want to know, came the reply from one of the men. Plumb tuckered out, that's the matter. They need a rest. Rest be blanked. What the fuck? Rest be blanked. Rest be blanked! I guess that's how you say swear words back then, said Hal, with his beardless lips. What a tragedy. Beardless lips like some kind of pussy. Where was I? Beardless lips! And Mercedes said, oh! In pain and sorrow at the oath. Yeah, she's Peach. But she was a clannish creature and rushed at once to the defense of her brother. Never mind that man, she said pointedly. You're the driver of our dogs, and you do what you think is best with them. Again, Hal's whip fell upon the dogs. They threw themselves against the breastband, dug their feet into the packed snow, got down low to it, and put forth all their strength. The sled held as though it were an anchor. After 2 efforts, they stood still, panting. The whip was whistling savagely. When once more Mercedes interfered, she dropped on her knees before Buck, with tears in her eyes, and put her arms around his neck. You poor dear, she cried sympathetically. Why don't you pull hard? Then you wouldn't be whipped. And Buck's thinking, this bitch is fucking retarded. That's not in the book. That's not in the book. Yeah, I wish it was. I wish it was. This bitch be fucking retarded. Buck did not like her, but he was feeling too miserable to resist her, taking it as part of the day's miserable work. One of the onlookers, who had been clenching his teeth to suppress hot speech, now spoke up. It's not that I care what becomes of you, but for dog's sake, I just want to tell you, you can't help them a mighty lot by breaking out that sled. The runners are froze fast. Throw your weight against the G-pool, right and left, and break it out. I can imagine being that motherfucker. For sure. A third attempt was made, but this time, following the advice, Hal broke out the runners, which had been frozen to the snow. The overloaded, unwieldy sled forged ahead, Buck and his mate struggling frantically under the rain of blows. 100 yards ahead, the path turned and sloped steeply into the main street. It would have required an experienced man to keep the top-heavy sled upright, and Hal was not such a man. As they swung on the turn, the sled went over, spilling half its load through the loose lashings. The dogs never stopped. The lightened load bounded on its side behind them. They were angry because of the ill treatment they had received, and the unjust load. Buck was raging. He broke into a run, the team following his lead. Hal cried, "Whoa! Whoa!" But they gave no heed. He tripped and was pulled over his feet. The capsized sled ground over him, and the dogs dashed on up the street, adding to the gaiety of Skagway as they scattered the remainder of the outfit along its chief thoroughfare. Oh, yeah. Kind-hearted citizens caught the dogs and gathered up the scattered belongings. Oh, you fucking dumbass fools. They don't know what they're doing. I'm just trying to be nice. Well, you're fucking shit up for everybody. Stop being nice. Half the load and twice the dogs, if they ever expected to reach Dawson, was what said Hal, and his sister and brother-in-law listened unwillingly. Pitched tent and overhauled the outfit. Canned goods were turned out that made men laugh, for canned goods on the long trail is a thing to dream about. Blankets for a hotel, quoth one of the men who laughed and helped. Half as many is too much. Get rid of them. Throw away that tent and all those dishes. Who's going to wash them anyway? Good Lord, do you think you're traveling on a Pullman? I don't know what a Pullman is, but it sounds better than a dog sled anyway. And so it went inexorably. Elimination of superfluous. Mercedes cried when her clothes bags were dumped on the ground and article after article was thrown out. She cried in general, and she cried in particular over each discarded thing. She clasped about knees, rocking back and forth broken-heartedly. She averred she would not go an inch, not for a dozen. Charles's? She would not go, not for a dozen Charleses? The fuck does that mean? She appealed to everybody and to everything, finally wiping her eyes and proceeding to cast out even articles of apparel that were imperative necessaries. And in her zeal, when she had finished with her own, she attacked the belongings of her men and went through them like a tornado. This accomplished, the outfit, though cut in half, was still a formidable bulk. Charles and Hal went out in the evening and bought 6 outside dogs. These added to the 6 of the original team, and Teek and Kuna, the Husky, of the original team, and Teek and Kuna, the Huskies obtained at Rink Rapids on the record trip, brought the team up to 14. But the outside dogs, though particularly broken in since their landing, did not amount to much. That's great. 3 were short-haired pointers. What the fuck are you doing? 1 was a Newfoundland. That's a good dog. And the other 2 not seem to know anything. These newcomers not to know anything. These newcomers. Buck and his comrades looked upon them with disgust. Of course you do. And though speedily taught them their places and what not to do, he could not teach them what to do. They did not take kindly to trace and trail, with the exception of 2 mongrels that were bewildered and spirit broken by the strange savage environment in which they found themselves and by ill treatment they had received. The 2 mongrels were without spirit at all. Bones were the only things breakable about them. Oh. So they're stubborn, but Like, I'll show up and do my job, but don't fuck with me. I'll do it. When bones are the only thing that will break about you, that's going to be your attitude. Look, I'll do the job, but don't with your fucking nonsense. With the newcomers hopeless and forlorn, and the old team worn out by 2,500 miles, the continuous trail, the outlook was anything but bright. Two men, however, were quite cheerful, and they were proud too. They were doing the thing in style with 14 dogs. They had seen other sleds depart over the pass for Dawson, or come in from Dawson, but never had they seen a sled with so many as 14 dogs. Good, because when you fuck up, you're going to have to eat some. In the nature of the Arctic travel, there was a reason why 14 dogs should not drag one sled. And that was that one sled could not carry the food for 14 dogs. Oh, great. That's great. But Charles and Hal did not know this because they're dumbasses, and they had worked the trip out with a pencil. So much to a dog, so many dogs, and so many days. QED. I don't know what that means. QED. Mercedes looked over their shoulders and nodded comprehensively. It was also very simple. The next morning, late next morning, Buck led the long team up the street. There was nothing lively about it, no snap or go in him and his fellows. They were starting dead weary. 4 times they had covered the distance between Saltwater and Dawson, and the knowledge that, jaded and tired, he was facing the same trail once more made him bitter. Hi, Wyatt. His heart was not in the work, nor was the heart of any dog. The outsiders were timid and frightened, the insides without confidence in their masters. But then Buck felt vaguely that there was no depending upon these 2 men and the woman. They did not know how to do anything, and as the days went by, it became apparent they could not learn. They were slack in all things. Without order or discipline. It took them half the night to pitch a slovenly camp. Shut the fuck up. And half the morning to break that camp and get the sled loaded in fashion so slovenly for the rest of the day that they were occupied in stopping and rearranging the load. Some days they did not make 10 miles. On other days they were unable to get started at all. And on no day did they succeed in making more than half the distance used by men as a basis in their dog food computation. Oh, these people are fucking retards. Retards. They're fucking retarded. It was inevitable that they should go on short. What the fuck? It was inevitable that they should go. Don't interrupt me, you fucking interrupting cow. It was inevitable that they should go short on dog food, but they hastened. They hastened it by overfeeding, bringing the day nearer when underfeeding would commence. And there's Mr. Bear's clickety-clacks against the floor. Hi, Mr. Bear. Tap dancing bear. You're interrupting the podcast. I love you. You got a cute little face. And you and Wyatt are in here having noise competitions. I'm reading a book about a dog. Do you want to come up here? Get up here. Like, you're gonna have to walk past the lion. You're gonna have to walk past the lion of no halls. The house of no halls. Get up here. I don't want to hear your clickety-clacks. I'll deal with his whininess. There he goes. As soon as Wyatt's walking away. Well, if Wyatt doesn't want your attention, I don't want your attention. Fuck you, Mr. Bear. I know you just smell food cooking in the oven, you dick. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Underfeeding would commence. The outside dogs, whose digestion had not been trained by chronic famine to make the most of little, had voracious appetites, and when in addition to this, the worn-out huskies pulled weakly. Hal decided that orthodox ration was too small. He doubled it, and to cap it all, when Mercedes, with tears in her pretty eyes and a quaver in her throat, could not cajole him into giving the dogs still more, she stole from the fish sacks and fed them slyly. What a bitch. But it was not food that Buck and the Huskies needed, but rest. And though they were making poor time, the heavy load sapped their strength severely. Good Lord. How long is this chapter? Jesus fucking Christ. I don't want to turn this into 2. Oh, we're far ways off. But I feel like this is going extra long, and the struggles that I went through today with file sizes and bullshit. Jesus fucking Christ. Anyway, we're going to press on. Sapped their strength severely. Then came the underfeeding. Hal awoke one day to the fact that his dog food was half gone, that the distance only quarter covered, further that the love or money no additional dog was to obtain. So he cut down even the orthodox ration and tried to increase the day's travel. His sister and brother-in-law seconded him, but they were frustrated by their heavy outfit and their own incompetence. It was a simple matter to give the dogs less food, but it was impossible to make the dogs travel faster, while their own inability to get underway earlier in the morning prevented them from traveling longer hours. Not only did they not know how to work dogs, but they did not know how to work themselves. Hallelujah. The first to go was Dub, poor blundering thief. No, Pike was the malingerer. Poor blundering thief, that he was always getting caught and punished. He had nonetheless been a faithful worker. His wrenched shoulder blade, untreated and unrested, went from bad to worse, till finally Hal shot him with the big Colt revolver. Sometimes you gotta shoot dogs, I'm sorry. It happens. It is a saying of the country that an outside dog starves to death on the ration of the husky. So the 6 outside dogs under Buck could do no less than die on the half ration of the husky. The Newfoundland went first. Oh no. Followed by 3 short-haired pointers. Yeah, they didn't belong there in the first place. The 2 mongrels hanging more grittily on to life, but going in the end. Oh, that's sad. We don't want to see the mutts go. But the short-haired pointers, give me a fucking break. What were you doing with short-haired pointers in Alaska? for sled dogs. Jesus. By the time all the amenities of the gentleness of the Southland had fallen away from the three people, shorn of its glamour and romance, Arctic travel had become to them a reality too harsh for their manhood and womanhood. Smoker's hat. Mercedes ceased weeping over the dogs, being too occupied with weeping over herself and with quarreling with her husband and brother. To quarrel was their one thing they were never too weary to do. Their irritability arose out of their misery, increased with it, doubled upon it, outdistanced it, the wonderful patience of the trail, which comes to men who toil hard and suffer sore, and remain sweet of speech and kindly, did not come to these two men and the woman. They had no inkling of such a patience. They were stiff and in pain. Their muscles ached, their bones ached, their very hearts ached, and because of this they became sharp of speech, and hard words were first on their lips. In the morning of and hard words were first on their lips in the morning and last at night. Charles and Hal wrangled over Mercedes. Charles and Hal wrangled whenever Mercedes gave them a chance. It was the cherished belief of each that he did more than his share of the work, and neither forbade to speak this belief at every opportunity. Sometimes Mercedes sided with her husband, sometimes Mercedes sided with her brother, probably whichever served her the best at the time, because she's obviously a bitch. That's not in the book. I added that. The result was a beautiful and unending family quarrel, starting from a dispute as to which should chop a few sticks for fire, a dispute which concerned only Charles and Hal, presently would be lugged in the rest of the family. Fathers, mothers, uncles, cousins, people thousands of miles away, and some of them dead. That Hal's view on art or the sort of society plays his mother's brother wrote should have anything to do with the chopping of a few sticks of firewood passes comprehension. Nevertheless, the quarrel was likely to tend in the direction of Charles' political prejudices, and that Charles' sister's tale-bearing tongue should be relevant to building a Yukon fire was apparent only to Mercedes, who disburdened herself of copious opinions upon the topic, and incidentally upon a few other traits unpleasantly peculiar to her husband's family. In the meantime, the fire remained unbuilt, the camp half pitched, and the dogs unfed. These people suck. This is like some Thanksgiving shit. Why? Don't fuck around. No. I know exactly when you're gonna start crying. We're going about this. Mercedes nursed a special grievance. The grievance of sex. Okay, here we go. Now this shit's getting real. Mercedes nursed a special grievance, the grievance of sex. She was pretty and soft, and had been chivalrously treated all her days. But the present treatment by her husband and brother was everything save of chivalrous. Oh my God, I don't want to know where this is going. It was her custom to be helpless. They, com- they complained, upon which impeachment of what to her was her most essential sex prerogative, she made their lives unendurable. She no longer considered the dogs, and because she was sore and tired, she persisted in riding on the sled. She was pretty and soft, but she weighed 120 pounds. Whoa, 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 whoa. Pretty and soft. Well, I guess at 120 you're gonna be soft. I don't know how pretty you're gonna be, depending on your height, but 120. Jesus, she sounds like a little chunk. I don't know. Did they say how tall she is? If you're 5'9" and 120, okay, let's go. If you're 5 foot and 120, probably not. Let's just put that out there. Unless you got really big boobies. I don't know what to say. A lusty last straw to load, dragged by weak and starving animals. She rose for days till they fell in the trances and the sled stood still. Charles and Hal begged her to get off and walk, pleaded with her, entreated the while she wept and importuned heaven with a recital of their brutality. Yeah, I bet. On one occasion, she took... I just pushed out a fart, just in case you guys didn't hear that. On one occasion, they took her off the sled by main strength. They never did it again. She let her legs go limp like a spoiled child and sat down on the trail. They went on their way, but she did not move. After they had traveled 3 miles, they unloaded the sled and came back for her. What a fucking cunt. And by main strength, put her on the sled again. You guys should have left her there to die. You should have left that stupid bitch to die. I don't care. Nope. You want to act like a brat? We can't afford brats on the trail in the Arctic. You may as well be bear food. Great, wonderful northern bear, we send you this sacrifice to grow your children to be something better than what the fuck this is. In the excesses of their own misery, they were callous to the suffering of their animals. Hal's theory, which he practiced on others, was that one must get hardened. He had started out preaching to his sister and brother-in-law. Failing there, he hammered it into the dogs with a club. At the five fingers, the dog food gave out, and a toothless old squaw offered to trade them a few pounds of frozen horsehide for the Colt's revolver that kept the big hunting knife company at Hal's hip. A poor substitute for food was this hide, just as it had been stripped from the starved horses of the cattlemen 6 months back. In its frozen state, it was more like strips of galvanized iron, and when a dog wrestled it into his stomach, it thawed into thin, innutritious leather strings and into mass of a short hair, irritating and indigestible. Jesus Christ, I'm trying to get a gauge on how much further we gotta go. Oh, we're in the deep, boys, and Daddy needs a cigarette. I'm upset that book spine fucking shattered, and That bear is fucking empty. So I'm going to have to leave you all for a brief moment to retrieve another tin soldier out of the what they call that shit on Star Trek. Not the cube. The cube. So the Borg were inside of the. Was it the cube? Is it not the cube? I'll think of it. There's the Borg. They had a giant ship that was a cube. There's no way that they called it the fucking cube. Out of the fucking. Now I can't even remember what the toy is. What's the fucking toy? A Rubik's Cube? They did not call that shit the cube. Swear to God. I'll look it up after. It was not the cube. Not the square. It was not the cube. It was the... If it's the cube, that's dumb as shit. I can say that right now. We are the Borg. We will assimilate you into the cube. That's not cool. Not a block. Not a prism. Could you imagine if we're just like, oh, the amazing prisms of Egypt. Were they built by aliens? The prisms of Egypt? Really wish I knew what that shit was. Wyatt, do not bully me. Do not scream at me. I'm in the middle of something. And though it all, Buck staggered along at the head of the team, as in a nightmare. He pulled when he could. When he could no longer pull, he fell down and remained down, till blows from a whip or a club drove him to his feet again. Oh. Buck's fucking... He's come a long way. He's a fucking animal. Like, if he was in the military, he'd be like a... Spec Ops. Fucking Special Operations Force. For sure. Fucking Navy SEAL. PJ. Fucking Green Beret. Whatever the fucking Marines have. I don't know. Whipper Club drove him to his feet again. All the stiffness and gloss had gone out of him, of his beautiful furry coat. The hair hung down limp and draggled or matted with dry blood where Hal's club bruised him. His muscles had wasted away to knotty strings, and the flesh pads had disappeared, so that each rib and every bone in his loose frame were outlined cleanly through the loose hide that was wrinkled in the folds of emptiness. It was heartbreaking. Only Buck's heart was unbreakable. The man in the red sweater had proved that. As it was with Buck, so it was with his mates. They were what the fuck? Permubulating skeletons? That's a new one to me. Don't fucking half meow, you fucking weirdo. There were 7 altogether, including him. In their very great misery, they had become insensible to the bite of the lash or the bruise of the club. The pain of them beating was dull and distant, just as the thinning their eyes saw and their ears heard seemed dull and distant distant. They were not half living or quarter living. They were simply so many bags of bones in which sparks of life fluttered faintly. When a halt was made, they dropped down in the traces like dead dogs, and the spark dimmed and paled and seemed to go out. And when the club or whip fell upon them, the spark fluttered feebly. And when the whip or whip fell upon them, the spark fluttered feebly up, and they tottered to their feet and staggered on. Jesus Christ. Where the fuck was PETA then? There came a day when Billy, not Billy, the good-natured, fell and could not rise. Hal had traded off his revolver, so he took the axe and knocked Billy on the head, and as he lay in the traces, then cut the carcass out of the harness and dragged it to one side. Buck saw, and his mates saw, and they knew that the thing was very close to them. And the next day, Kuna went, and but 5 of them remained. Joe too far gone to be malignant, Pike crippled and limping, only half conscious and not conscious enough longer to malinger. Solik the one-eyed, still faithful to the toil of the trace and the trail, and mournful in that he had so little strength with which to pull. Teek, who had not traveled so far that winter, and who was now beaten more than the others because he was fresher, and Buck still at the head of the team, but no longer enforcing discipline or striving to enforce it, blind with weakness half the time and keeping the trail by the loom of it and by the dim feel of his feet. This shit's getting depressing as fuck. This shit's going Game of Thrones where all your favorite characters just die. Jesus Christ. Superstar. Jesus. Help all these poor little puppies. All these poor sad little puppies getting just run to death. I hope these people die. I'm gonna say it right now. I don't remember all these parts of this book. I've read this book more than any other book. I don't remember the tragedy of this. But I hope these assholes die. These stupid fucking white people. They're obviously white people. Nobody else was going up there back then. It was just crazy, stupid white people. They're like, we're supposed to be pioneers. We're pioneers. Like, go watch 1883. That movie says it obviously. And it's not American white people. It's dumbass European white people that don't even speak the language. They're like, where'd you go? Where'd you go out there? It's not so bad. You ever spent the night outside? It's fine. We're fine. We're arrogant. We know what we're doing all the time. Now these poor puppies are dying left and right. And I hope these white people have to eat each other. It was beautiful spring weather, but neither dogs nor humans were aware of it. Each day the sun rose earlier and set later. It was dawn by 3 in the morning, and twilight lingered till 9 at night, and lingered till 9 at night. The whole long day was a blaze of sunshine. The ghostly winter silence had given way to the 89. Oh, no, we're missing a page. That's why I'm so careful. Winter silence had given way to the great spring murmur of awakening life. This murmur arose from all the land, fraught with joy of living, and it came from the things that lived and moved again, things which had been as dead and which had not moved during the long months of frost. The sap was rising in the pines. The willows and aspens were bursting out in young buds. Shrubs and vines were putting on fresh garbs of green. Crickets sang in the nights, and in the days all manner of creeping and crawling things rustled forth into the sun. Partridges and woodpeckers were booming and knocking in the forest. Squirrels were chattering, birds were singing, and overhead honked the wild fowl, driving up from the south in cunning wedges that split the air. From every hill and slope came the trickle of running water, the music of unseen fountains. All the things were thawing, bending, snapping. The Yukon was straining to break loose the ice that bound it down. It ate away from beneath. The sun ate from above. Air holes formed, fissures sprang and spread apart, while thin sections of ice fell, through bodily into the river. And amid all the bursting, rending, throbbing, and awakening life under the blazing sun, and through the soft, sighing breezes, like wayfarers to death, staggered the two men, the woman, and the huskies. With dogs falling, Mercedes weeping and riding, Hal swearing unconsciously, and Charles' eyes wistfully watering, they staggered into John Thornton's camp at the mouth of White River. When they halted, the dogs dropped down as though they had all been struck dead. Mercedes dried her eyes and looked at John Thornton. Charles sat down on a log to rest. He sat down very slowly and painstakingly. And what of his great stiffness? Hal did the talking. John Thornton was whittling the last touches on an axe handle, and he had made a stick from birch. He whittled and listened, gave monosyllabic replies. So monosyllabic. So like yes, no, okay. One syllable statements. Just so we're all on the same page. And when it was asked terse advice, he knew the breed, and he gave his advice in the certainty that it would not be followed. They told us up above that the bottom was dropping out of the trail, and that the best thing for us to do was lay over, Hal said, in response to Thornton's warning to take no more chances on the rotten ice. They told us we couldn't make White River, and here we are. This was the last sneering ring of triumph in it. And they told you true, John Thornton answered. The bottom's likely to drop out any moment. Only fools with blind luck of fools could have made it. I tell you straight, I wouldn't risk my carcass on that ice for all the gold in Alaska. Probably listen to him. That's because you're not a fool, I suppose, said Hal, because he's inbred. Just kidding, that's not in the book. Uh, all the same, we'll go to Dawson. He uncoiled his whip. Get up here, Buck. Hi, get up here and mush on. Yep. They took her name. That's how I imagine this dude. Good Lord. Thornton went on whittling. It was idle. He knew to get between a fool and his folly, while 2 or 3 fools, more or less, would not alter the scheme of things. But the team did not get up in command. It had long since passed into the stage where blows were required to rouse it. The whip flashed out, and here and there, on its merciless errands, John Thornton compressed his lips. Solix was the first to crawl to his feet. Teak followed. Joe came next. Yelping with pain, Pike made a painful effort. Twice he fell over when half up, and on the third attempt managed to rise. Buck made no effort. He lay quietly where he had fallen. The lash bit into him again and again, but he neither whined nor struggled. Several times Thornton started as though to speak, but changed his mind. A moisture came into his eyes, and as the whipping continued, he arose and walked irresolutely up and down. This was the first time Buck had failed. In itself, a sufficient reason to drive Hal into a rage. He exchanged the whip for a customary club, but Buck refused to move under the rain of heavier blows, which now fell upon him. Like his mates, he was barely able to get up, but unlike them, he had made up his mind not to get up. He had a vague feeling of impending doom. This had been strong upon him when he pulled into the bank, and it had not departed from him. What of the thin and rotten ice he had felt under his feet all day? It seemed that he sensed disaster close at hand. Out there on the ice, where his master was trying to drive him, he refused to stir. So greatly had he suffered, and so far gone he was, that the blows did not hurt him much. The blows did not hurt much. I added words to that for some reason. Jesus. Oh, jeez. Where were we at? Did not hurt him. Did not hurt much. And as they continued to fall upon him, the spark of life within him flickered and went down. It was nearly out. He felt strangely numb, as though from a great distance he was aware that he was being beaten. The last sensations of pain left him. He no longer felt anything, though very faintly he could hear the impact of the club upon his body. But it was no longer his body. It seemed so far away. And then suddenly, without warning, uttering a cry that was inarticulate and more like the cry of an animal, John Thornton sprang upon the man who wielded the club. Hal was hurled backwards, and as though struck by a falling tree, Mercedes screamed. Charles looked on wistfully, wiped his watery eyes, but did not get up because his stiffness. John Thornton stood over Buck, struggling to control himself, too convulsed with rage to speak. If you strike that dog again, I'll kill you, he at last managed to say in a choking voice. It's my dog, Hal replied, wiping the blood from his mouth as he came back. Get out of my way or I'll fix you. I'm going to Dawson. Thornton stood between him and Buck. And evidenced evinced no intention of getting out of the way. Hal drew his long hunting knife. Mercedes screamed, cried, laughed, and manifested the chaotic abandonment of hysteria. Thornton rapped Hal's knuckles with the axe handle, knocking the knife to the ground. He rapped his knuckles again and tried to pick it up. Then stooped, picked it up himself, and with 2 strokes cut Buck's traces. Fuck yeah! Save Buck. Hal had no fight left in him. Besides, his hands were full with his sister, or his arms rather, while Buck was too near dead to be of further use in hauling a sled. A few minutes later they pulled out from the bank and down the river. Buck heard them go and raised his head to see. Pike was leading. Solix was at the wheel, and between were Joe and Teak, but they were limping and staggering. Mercedes was riding the loaded sled. Hal guided at the G-pool, and Charles stumbled along in the rear. As Buck watched them, Thornton knelt beside him, and with a rough, kindly hand searched for his broken bones. By the time his search had disclosed nothing more than many bruises and a state of terrible starvation. The sled was a quarter of a mile away. Dog and man watched it crawling along over the ice. Suddenly they saw its back end drop down as into a rut, and the G-pool with Hal climbing to it jerked into the air. Mercedes' screams came into their ears. They saw Charles turn and make one step to run back, and then a whole section of ice gave way, and dogs and humans disappeared. A yawning hole was all that was to be seen. The bottom had dropped out of the trail. John Thornton and Buck looked at each other. "You poor devil," said John Thornton, and Buck licked his hand. See, I knew there's a reason I love this fucking book. It's a great book. It's a wonderful, wonderful book that, honestly, with Mercedes' behavior, it's no surprise that the most emotional connection that a man can have is with a dog. Because bitches be crazy, yo. One more fart for the go.